They can't give us COVID tests for free, but we've just spent $3.5 billion on tanks. Now, that works out at about 230 million rats, assuming a retail price of $15. They probably cost $1 or $2 to make, so we've got a profit margin in there for Discount Chemist Warehouse and Harvey Norman. You know, this is a real coincidence because, like many of you, we were just thinking the other day about how we really need some tanks. Peter Dutton is sending a strong message. You Chinese, you better watch out. We can have a military parade with our tanks. You can't have a military parade with rat tests. And if all goes wrong with WA and they try to secede, then we can always use them at the border war against Mark McGowan. Now, seriously, who are they listening to, these guys? These guys who are in charge, who are the stewards of our wealth, who are managing the country for them. If these guys were in charge of Iceland, you could fair dinkum sell them a fleet of dune buggies and beach towels. All you'd need to do is donate to the coalition and hire a good lobbyist. Who do they listen to? When it comes to energy and climate, they listen to coal and gas firms, to the fossil fuel sector. When it comes to defence, they listen to the weapons lobby, ASPI and so on, who are funded by the weapons lobby, who are paid by government to lobby government. When it comes to the economy, we know that they weren't listening to independent analysts. They were listening to the business lobby, the BCA, which is foreign-controlled members. So when it comes to health, which is the real security crisis for Australia at the moment, because without a health system, you don't have an economy. The pandemic is out of control. They're backflipping and reintroducing things that they dumped, which allowed the pandemic to flare up even more than it should have. So who are they listening to? Well, we know from the September briefings for the media and politicians from the Doherty Institute, which was asked independently to model the virus in September and then again in November. We're talking mathematical biologists, we're talking epidemiologists, we're talking experts in a number of medical fields. The advice was,
with vaccination in the mix, it can do more of that work, but we are still going to need a balance of now 3 components to control disease moving forward.
Vaccination, great. Keep that up. Keep pushing the vaccinations. The other advice was, do not dismantle all the health precautions like masks and testing. The government was advised on a number of occasions. In fact, Treasury and the Doherty Institute together provided this advice to our politicians. Together, the advice from Treasury was that the economy would be damaged if the pandemic got out of control.
You know, the first piece of work we did was actually in partnership with Treasury, who have released their own report, and it was the joint position of Health and Treasury that keeping case numbers low was good for health, but it was also good for the economy. It meant that we would be in a more stable position. Treasury gave the example of the US, where they didn't want to have restrictions because of the economy, but at high case loads, people were too frightened to go outside, and anybody who could self-isolate did. And so you get other implications. So this low case strategy sort of ticked all the boxes in terms of a stable future, but also having the best economic outcomes for Australia as an overall strategy.
So exactly what the scientists and Treasury warned has happened. It has come through, because last week we saw the ANZ consumer spending figures, and they show, particularly New South Wales, which is the biggest economy, things are in a record slump. So Australia hit a one-day record of 100,000 infections. Today, the numbers are smaller in New South Wales, primarily because, of course, the queues are too long. People aren't getting tested. I'm certainly not. I can't afford to stand in a queue for hours or find a queue to stand in. Can't get a rat test even from Chemist Warehouse. So the numbers in New South Wales today are only 20,000 total new cases. More than 2,000 people in hospital, however, 159 people in ICU, 18 deaths after 16 deaths were reported in yesterday's figures. Victoria, that's surpassed New South Wales because of this anomaly in the testing, because people aren't getting tested and the rat tests aren't being reported yet. Now, this is convenient for the government, but it's only a mask which will slip away very quickly because of course, the numbers are exponentially on the rise. Thanks to its corporate media allies, the government is spinning this idea that we had to let it rip, that we're just about to surpass the peak. Whatever their spin, it doesn't matter. Time and time again, coalition governments have failed to take professional advice, not just in health, but in a number of fields. And this is disastrous. 18 people dead in New South Wales. But there's a pattern here. Gladys Berejiklian, every day we were urged to follow the health advice.
Tested, follow the health advice, follow the health advice. But what the New South Wales government does is rely on the health advice. You follow the health advice. If we follow the advice, we will all be okay. Oh, well, what I do is follow the health advice. With all due respect, I'll follow the health advice rather than the advice of my political colleagues.
They said, we follow the health advice. When actually asked, what is the health advice? Can we see this mysterious health advice that you purport to be following? We didn't get an answer. In fact, we put in freedom of information requests, and when the FOIs came back months later, they gave us a link to a bunch of press conference videos. Meanwhile, at the federal level, same deal. Clearly, they did not follow the medical advice. Dominique Perrottet in New South Wales let it rip, discarded the health advice. Scott Morrison, Greg Hunt at the federal level discarded the health advice. They followed Perrottet's lead, and now it's a disaster. New South Wales has exported this virus to other states. The hospital system is under extreme pressure. Private hospitals are being now dragged in to care for the extra needs of the public system. That's going to be a huge spend of public money on top of the public system, because these guys are going to charge like wounded bulls. And of course, the second major one, HealthScope, Josh Frydenberg signed off on HealthScope going to the Cayman Islands. So we have no visibility on at least 41, maybe 42 hospitals and path labs and so on in Australia. We don't know how much profit they're making. We don't know how much business they're getting. We don't know what their capabilities are. But you can be sure of one thing. They'll be following the advice of their public relations experts from Cosby Textor. They'll be following the advice of lobbyists and their mates from the Business Council of Australia. They'll be hanging on every word of Jerry Harvey or big business figures who they adulate so much. But the one thing they won't follow is professional advice from experts in a field. They prefer to follow the advice of people that are going to make money from them. Scott Morrison urges us to ride the wave.
We have no choice but to ride the wave.
The problem is, it's a tidal wave. Thanks to those who support us on Patreon. Please donate to help us keep the heat on government in Australia.